We grieve the loss of our narratives, the narratives around our happy endings, of our someday better, of the idea that someday justice will be served. We have to give up on schemas that may have guided us our entire lives, that parents do the right thing. Parents love us unconditionally. Love means that someone cares for us. Let's talk about the one risk of going no contact. To start, let's consider two scenarios. Situation 1. A person breaks up with or ends a relationship with a narcissistic person and almost right away goes no contact. You break up and done. Block them, done. The person in the relationship feels a tremendous sense of relief after the initial grief wears off and isn't having to deal that much with getting affected by angry texts or emails or calls, though sometimes the narcissistic person manages to get them in here and there. But by and large, no contact works, especially, again, like I said, after that initial month, the initial grief. And the person who went through the breakup just feels the weight of toxicity off of them and feels lighter and better. About 6 months later, the narcissistic person reaches back out and starts a bit of a hoover. And after 6 months of no contact, the person who was in the relationship with the narcissist feels a lot stronger and enjoying their new freedom and their new life and feels like, of course, I can be an adult and communicate with them. In a way, some of the memories have faded and there's not much to reinforce them because you're not in contact with them. Maybe even a little euphoric recall creeps in, maybe not. But a few texts, a few emails, a call here or there, nothing major. And then even the belief that, no way, no big deal, no problem. I ran into them at a coffee shop. We can have a coffee. I'll show them what they're missing. I'm healed. Now let's take situation 2. A person breaks up with or ends a relationship with a narcissistic person and they can't go no contact. Maybe they share kids. Maybe they can't move out right away. Maybe this is a family member and you can't cut out all of your family members right away. Maybe no contact feels too extreme or too ghosty at first. In this period after the breakup, perhaps even for months, the narcissistic person is still texting you, calling, emailing. You still see them. Maybe you have to see them. For example, you have kids together. And it is worse than ever. Maybe it is full-on post-separation abuse. Maybe it is angry texts that come in the middle of the night. Maybe it's mean stuff and passive-aggressive posts on social media, or them posting passive or active-aggressive stuff about you anywhere they can. But only you know it's about you. It all feels awful. You feel just as bad, maybe even worse, than you did while you were in the relationship. But you also think, okay, at least I am out of the relationship, and over time, maybe this will improve. Well, in many, not all, but in many cases over time, some of the post-separation stuff settles down. Maybe the narcissistic person finds a new relationship or something else to keep them busy and out of your hair. Or you are able to just finally construct the stronger boundaries with your family. And while it doesn't feel perfect, it feels better. 6 months pass. And there is contact from the narcissistic person. Well, you never stopped having contact with them. And you see their name in your inbox or in your texts or DMs, and you feel sick. And you take a minute to determine if they even need to be responded to. And either you do with a brief response and hope that the whole contact is done, or you don't respond at all and just hope you just don't have to deal with them again this day or this week or have to see them again too soon. So both of the people in these two situations have different sorts of advantages. Now, no contact can definitely carry some burdens: guilt, grief, shame, that sense that you've ghosted someone, especially if you're the one who did the no contact. Even a sense that you might have abandoned someone, but then pretty quickly, not having to deal with them is really like having a massive stress removed from your life. I imagine that maybe it feels like voluntary retirement. After years of stress and work and waking up with like, oh God, I have to do this today. You wake up and you're like, I just have to chill today. Now, people who can't go no contact sometimes wonder during the time after the breakup if they just made things harder for themselves, that the abuse is worse, that the narcissistic person keeps playing the victim, that other people might have bought it and are now looking at you suspiciously like you're the problem, you're tense, and it feels like it's unrelenting vindictiveness, especially if you are the one who left. However, the person who doesn't go no contact at the beginning may ultimately have a decided advantage. And you may be surprised to hear that, but they do. Because the person who doesn't go no contact from the beginning of the breakup, these are people who are far less likely to romanticize or euphorically recall the narcissistic person. There is so much ickiness that keeps happening after the point of splitting that post-separation phase becomes its own damn relationship phase. There was the confusion and the emotional abuse that happened in the relationship. And then there was a whole new flavor of abuse related to the breakup. And the combination of all of that and the ongoing contact can mean that initially, that the people who have ongoing contact are at a healing disadvantage. But when ongoing communication continues to happen even 6 months or a year out, there's no sense of, oh, I'm sure I can engage, I got this. There's still this long-term sense of, what the hell do they want now? And how can I make this message and them go away as soon as possible? Folks who are able to or choose to do quick no contact after a breakup are actually sometimes a little more vulnerable to the Hoover. Because the door closes quickly on the narcissistic person after the breakup, and there is no more data coming along to remind you what that relationship was really about, in the absence of getting that new data, yes, you do feel stronger as a result of the no contact. But then over time, it's not uncommon to think, well, I got this, or we had some good times, or we can be adults, or maybe, I kind of miss them. It's good to catch up. Maybe we could catch up like we used to. This lack of new data after the breakup is dangerous because it can mean that euphoric recall and softening the edges of the reasons this relationship ended happens. And also, you don't get new information reminding you that this is not good for you, not now, not ever. The people who have that ongoing contact with a narcissistic person for months and months and months and months after the relationship, the illusion is not only broken, it remains broken. And there may be a better muscle for not engaging because you still have to engage sometimes, so anytime you don't have to engage really feels good. Now, this is not to say that if it works for you, and it unfolds as no contact early in a breakup, that you're doomed. Not at all. It can actually be a real gift. But you have to be aware that early no contact after a narcissistic breakup, that it can set up this vulnerability to sort of forgetting some of the worst parts of it as you heal and aren't having to manage the ongoing stress of the narcissistic relationship and the toxic communication. And not getting the ongoing data of like, yep, this is why we're not in this together anymore. It means things like slowing down and remembering why it ended. It means flipping the pages of your ick list and saying, oh yeah, that's why this did not work out. It's looking at old toxic texts to remind you what this relationship was, and talking to friends who remembered what it was too. No contact can actually give us some swagger. I got this. This doesn't bother me anymore. No problem. They can't get to me. I can have a normal thing with them. Or even, I bet they miss me now. They may miss you, but they also probably haven't changed. And to those of you who are slogging through the exhausting post-separation abuse, ongoing toxic contact, is this ever going to end? Make this stop hellscape when you can't go no contact. Remember that these painful reminders and pearls of wisdom and bits of data may feel like they are slowing your healing down now. But I promise you, they are going to make you more Hoover-proof, less euphoric recall-y, and far less likely to deceive yourself in the long run. It may suck to not be able to go no contact early on, but there are some long-term dividends. Radical acceptance takes us to chapter 5 of It's Not You, and what I really consider to be the gateway to healing. Without radical acceptance, it can't happen. Radical acceptance by itself isn't healing, but you need it. It's a requirement. And unfortunately, it's not an easy place to get to or even to stay in. And it's not like, oh, great, walk through the gateway of radical acceptance and but rather, you walk through the gateway of radical acceptance and you start to recognize how difficult healing is going to be. So let's take a look at 6 things that's important for you to know about radical acceptance. But to get the full radical acceptance deep dive, you need to order the book. So point number 1 to understand about radical acceptance, it's not about giving in or signing off on what they are doing. Radical acceptance sometimes feels like, oh, so I am just accepting that they manipulate and that they are selfish and that they are a hypocrite and that they keep lying. It doesn't mean giving in, and it certainly doesn't mean submission. Okay, it's not at all what it means. It means acknowledging the reality of the relationship, and yes, that it will not change. It means clearing the air of false hopes and recognizing the painful reality of a situation. And that clears you and your energy. Instead of focusing on trying to fix yourself or be better or do more, you recognize that none of that works. And you put your energy into building up supports, processing the grief, excavating yourself, and finding meaning and purpose. But it's not giving in. And it's not hopelessness. It may actually be quite hopeful to engage in radical acceptance because there is a life on the other side that has so much more potential. Number 2 is that it sometimes hurts to engage in radical acceptance. It sometimes hurts more than what was actually happening in the relationship. Narcissistic relationships keep going with the steam that's created by inertia, status quo, seeing what we want to see or hope to see, not having to wrestle with uncomfortable feelings. Foremost amongst those uncomfortable feelings are guilt, grief, pity, and fear. Guilt at walking away, at quitting, at letting other people down, destabilizing children or family members' lives. Even about letting down the narcissistic person. You may even feel sorry for them and that you are not being kind when you walk away. And you're not being kind when you walk away from someone who is insecure and may even be crying and upset at you leaving. You have fear about the unknown. It may be a case of the devil you know, and fears of being alone, losing friends or family, losing material supports. But the biggest issue of all when it comes to radical acceptance is the grief. Radical acceptance means accepting the loss. And these could be many losses: the loss of a relationship, the loss of hope, the loss of other people, the loss of a future, the loss of belief in a someday better, a loss of purpose because your purpose was for a long time just fixing and managing this relationship. Well, that's gone too. This mix of feelings, the sense that you can't go back and have another chance at a childhood, or won't have a close-knit family, or a parent who was attuned to you, that can feel catastrophic. So it can feel easier to go back into the illusion of the narcissistic relationship and to keep compartmentalizing the hurt. But that's not what healing is. People want radical acceptance to mean, oh great, I accept and I feel better. It hurts first, and then you grieve, and then it hurts some more. And then you start to become your own person separate from them. And the world keeps spinning and you get stronger. It's not quick and easy and tidily wrapped up. It is a long and painful process. Number 3 thing you should know about radical acceptance is that it doesn't make their behavior hurt less. One mistake that people make is, okay, now that I have radically accepted, their behavior won't bother me anymore. Listen, folks, when someone says something hurtful, we hurt. When someone does something cruel, it stings. We don't lose our ability to feel just because you've gone through a narcissistic relationship, and frankly, you better hope you don't. It's not good for you. You still have empathy. You still have feelings. Radical acceptance means you may be less surprised by their bad behavior. Remember that you can work around it, that you can remind yourself that they will always behave in the same way when they are stressed and upset, and over time, that you will not blame yourself. But when they behave hurtfully, you will be disgusted, angry, hurt, or upset, and that's okay, because that means your detector mechanisms are working. Radical acceptance doesn't mean becoming numb to bad behavior. It means not being as surprised when it happens. Number 4 thing you should know about radical acceptance is that it is about accepting that their behavior won't change. It's important that you don't get stuck in the idea that it being about only that they won't change. Sometimes the idea that someone won't change is a very bitter pill to swallow, especially when it is someone you care about, a parent, a partner, an adult child, a sibling, as though you have completely given up on them and almost sentenced them to a life of eternal stuckness, even though this is only happening in your mind. The important thing to remember about radical acceptance is that it is the recognition that you have that their behavior will not change, that they do what they do to cover up their insecurity or manage their fragility or get supply, and that, frankly, is their only focus, that they don't really have that much empathy, and that they need these protective defenses, and that leads to the behavior that hurts you. Them merely being narcissistic is not what's hurting you. It's the behavior that people with this personality style show to the world. And remembering that this is about their behavior not changing, it may create some distance and make radical acceptance feel less damning. Number 5, radical acceptance doesn't mean you have to leave. Many folks are scared of radical acceptance because it feels like a call to action, that they have to end the relationship or go no contact or something that they're not ready to do. Frankly, you can radically accept and never leave the relationship. Radical acceptance is about perception and seeing the relationship clearly rather than being about having to make changes you may not be able to make or may not feel ready to make. It means seeing their behavior clearly so you are prepared for it. You share of yourself differently in the relationship. You figure out the workarounds. And sometimes when you strip the relationship to its honest and bare essence, it may become a wake-up call to leave, or it may plant seeds you will act on years down the road, or it may mean you will forever recognize the limitations of this relationship and cultivate others that are healthy and do uplift you. But radical acceptance is a shift in awareness. What you do with that awareness is entirely up to you. Number 6, radical acceptance may be a multi-step process. This isn't as simple as, I get it, I see the patterns, their behavior is narcissistic, I radically accept, now it's all good. This is many, many steps that in some cases can take many years. It's the sensing something isn't right. It's the willingness to say something isn't right, even if it's to yourself. It's the acknowledgement of the patterns and that they are unhealthy. It's recognizing that they haven't changed and won't change. The radical acceptance of that. It's the radical acceptance, it still hurts. It's the grief and guilt and shame and pain after you accept. It's the not fully believing it yet and not totally radically accepting and going back in and seeing if you were wrong. It's the having good days with them and believing you were wrong, and then the whole cycle starting again. And then it's about starting from square one with radical acceptance again. When these are big, important relationships, family, spouses, dear friends, business partners or bosses, siblings, we don't want to just quit. There's too much investment, too much history, too much love. So the process of radical acceptance is like slowly making a sculpture and adding more clay to it and taking it off and putting it back on. It's getting pulled back in and then seeing it even more clearly. Sometimes we go back and forth for a while until the radical acceptance becomes concrete. I watch clients go back and forth for a long time, and then I see them get it and something changes. But this process doesn't happen overnight. Radical acceptance is where this healing process starts in earnest. Grief is a standard part of the healing from any narcissistic relationship, because once you strip off the top and take a look into what the relationship is really about, it can be utterly devastating. And the sense of loss hits you like a tidal wave. Radical acceptance can be challenging for this reason. To radically accept means to see that it cannot change. And that means a very different reality than you occupied before. The grief can be so overwhelming that returning to the status quo, frankly, can feel easier. So let's take a look at the 9 things that you may grieve when you radically accept in a narcissistic relationship, frankly. Number 1 is hope. Hope leads the way, because for years in this relationship, regardless of the type of relationship it is, hope is what keeps these relationships going. Hope that they will change. Hope that they will apologize and take responsibility and be accountable, to go back to that initial love-bombing fool that you fell in love with. Hope that they'll become the parent you wanted. Hope that they'd have empathy, get you, see you. The hope it could get better, that the flashes of those good things that you sometimes see, that those good days could someday be here to stay. And to give that up is so painful, because it means you often feel that you are grieving what you had convinced yourself you were looking forward to, and now you have to accept that thing you were hoping for is never going to come. The grief over this may be the most pronounced grief of all, the most pronounced loss of all, I should say, especially when it's a very primal relationship. Your child self hoping that someday your parent will see you and get you. It's a lot to give up and finally lose. Number 2 thing you grieve is a healthy childhood and the soft place to land. It's not that anyone in narcissistic relationships with parents literally believes that the clock can go backwards and you get a do-over, but radical acceptance can fill you with a sense of grief for your child self that wouldn't, couldn't, and didn't get love, and instead was in the unfair position of having to silence yourself as a child, silence your own needs, or of facing a parent's wrath for just being a child, of being devalued if you weren't what they wanted you to be, or simply of not being seen. The ongoing engagement with the narcissistic parent can mean that you still are maintaining a hope for the relationship, as though, if we can finally get it right, it will make up for all the water under the bridge. So giving up hope can feel like you are giving up on addressing those wounds. It can also mean the grief of recognizing what really happened in your childhood and all of the mental justifications and accommodations and self-blame that you engaged in. And when you have to radically accept the narcissism of parents or of family members, you also have to grieve the illusion that you may have held on to for a long time, that you have a soft place to land in the world, a place of belonging or people who will have your back. You may have kind of acknowledged that your family was difficult for a long time, but really accepting it can feel overwhelming and really punctuated by loss. Number 3 thing we grieve is time. Lots and lots of lost time. Many folks spend years, decades, lifetimes in these relationships, and especially for folks who have been in long-term committed relationships or marriages, or who have spent years trying to please an invalidating narcissistic family system or even workplace, the sense of regret and lost time in particular can bring up a lot of grief. And alongside that, maybe opportunities lost and potential that you didn't get to access within yourself, or at least actualize, or actually actualize. Number 4 is the grieving of future. It may not be just about looking back, but also looking forward that brings up grief. You may have had a future in your mind, good, bad, or indifferent, but of a future of about where you were going to be living, or who you were spending your time with or your life with. And when you experience radical acceptance, or when you leave a narcissistic relationship, this will rewrite the book on what your future will be. You may have envisioned a future of having children and your partner and all of you being in the same house together and your kids growing up like that. You may have envisioned living in the house that you're in for a long time. You may have envisioned growing old with someone. You may have envisioned staying in a workplace where you believed in the mission and vision, but where you were narcissistically abused by colleagues or supervisors. The future may look empty in front of you, and grieving what felt like something predictable, even if it wasn't good for you, and potentially having to change what your life looks like, is a tremendous source of grief. Number 5 is you grieve a sense of family and a sense of belonging. Family can be lost or reshaped in the wake of radical acceptance. Some people may actually disengage from their family of origin. Some people may get a divorce or end another kind of committed relationship, which may mean things like shared custody of children. What you believed would be family, what you believed family would look like, may be upended by narcissism and the losses that you may incur once you see it clearly. Now, even if you keep engaging with the systems, there may still be grief because you recognize that it's not going to change. The barbs, the selfishness, the passive aggression, the overt aggression, the invalidation, it's all here to stay. And because of this, whether you step away from these various systems entirely, or just engage differently and see it clearly, it can mean that you feel that your conception of family is lost. You may grieve what you wanted your own family that you created, what you wanted that to look like. You may grieve what you wished your family of origin to be, and that grief may be magnified when you spend time with or see families that are close-knit and do draw together and support each other. You may grieve feeling that there was something you did believe you belonged to at one time. And narcissism and radical acceptance have shown you otherwise. Number 6 thing you grieve, stability. Even if the narcissistic relationship was invalidating, cruel, hurtful, destabilizing, you may have perceived it or experienced it as consistent. And as a result, that means that radical acceptance and really getting it, seeing what the narcissism is here, means that you lose what you believed was going to be stable. Whether that was where you lived, the way schedules were going to unfold, holidays, where you were going to work, you may be grieving consistency. Learning about narcissism can feel like the chair was pulled out from under us. Now, keep in mind that over time, you will learn that this conception of stability was really an illusion and that it was never stable. The only thing that may have made it stable was your willingness to accommodate them, do things the way that they wanted. You may be grieving this illusion of stability or the signifiers of stability, like the home you were living in, the Sunday dinners, and this so-called stability may have been eating you up inside. But initially, as you adjust to the new landscape created by clearing it out, by seeing narcissism clearly, by radical acceptance, that sort of loss of even of what we could call pseudo-stability can be overwhelming. Number 7 is the grief of narrative. Narratives are tricky. They are the stories that we write around and about our lives that we can get really stuck in. They are also a way in which we organize how we go through the world and what has happened to us. Well, needless to say, radical acceptance upends our narratives, whether they are happily ever after, or I forgive the people I love and everything will be fine, or families stick together through thick and thin, or that you are a part of a love story. Radical acceptance snatches that away, and we grieve the loss of our narratives, the narratives around our happy endings, of our someday better, of the idea that someday justice will be served. We have to give up on schemas that may have guided us our entire lives, that parents do the right thing. Parents love us unconditionally. Love means that someone cares for us or cares for me. When we clear out these narratives, painful as it is, it does clear out space and room for new things to grow. But it's very painful to let go of our maps and stories for our lives. The number 8 thing that we grieve is a sort of loss of innocence. You can't unsee this narcissism thing. Folks who have not been through narcissistic relationships, or who won't or can't see it, they get to maintain a rather warm and almost innocent view of the world. Good people win in the end. Justice prevails. People change. Forgiveness works. Love triumphs. This is the stuff of our childhood fairy tales, of what we had hoped was true. And for some fortunate folks, it is their life. But the earlier the narcissistic abuse began for you, the earlier you started to experience this loss of innocence. And while some people feel that once they understood narcissism, they felt that they became somewhat cynical, I don't know, the word cynical has a bad brand, right? I prefer to think of it as wisdom. And that wisdom can be felt as a loss of innocence. It's not always simple when that innocence goes for us, right? And many folks who initially see it, they grieve the loss of a simpler worldview, a world where trying harder can always fix a relationship, or being a good person is rewarded, or that hard work pays off. It's a lot to let go of and grieve, but as I said, the loss of innocence is often backfilled with a sense of wisdom, and from that can come other really important and good stuff like discernment that you need to protect you in a world full of narcissistic people. And number 9 is a big one, and that's that we grieve that loss of any sense of justice. Narcissistic relationships and narcissism in general are where justice goes to die. Narcissistic people know how to fly just under the radar so they can make other people's lives miserable, but in doing so, they don't really break the rules or laws in a way that means they're going to get caught. And because they don't weigh themselves down with silly things like empathy, they're able to gallop off into their new future sort of seemingly unscathed, while it feels like you're stuck and can take you years to figure it out. They will quit jobs to avoid paying support to an ex-partner. They will engage in smear campaigns and get away with it. They will lose one job because of harassment, but find a new one right away. The enablers still enable them, and when you throw in there that you may have been played by the rules, been a good person, tried to be a great partner, child, friend, employee, and it still didn't work out, all of that together means that you may grieve a sense of justice, of fairness, of rightness in the world, and healing in the absence of that is not easy. Ironically, while losing the narcissistic relationship may sting for a minute, especially if you have not gone through radical acceptance, this other stuff may be more difficult. Once you see how much more smoothly your life is running, even if you were trauma bonded, that part gets easier. But this other stuff, your beliefs, hope, belonging, it can feel too much to process that much loss. But grief is a natural process, one of those things that unites all human beings. And the grief is a painful tunnel that you go through, because as you emerge, having gone through the grief and acceptance, some really good stuff awaits. So forgiveness is a messy space in the narcissistic relationship world. Now, word on the street is that generally forgiveness is a good thing and people heal and everyone's a winner, except when antagonism or narcissism and stuff related to that are around. That damned except, though, is what gets forgotten. When people are forgiveness shaming you, by the way, and you're wondering why all this forgiveness isn't helping your healing. Now, in the past, on this channel, I talked about a research study that was done in 2016 by McNulty and Russell. And in their research paper, they showed us the data that forgiveness may be good and well, and there's lots of research that shows forgiveness is all good and well, but that it doesn't really work well when you're dealing with someone antagonistic. And they found that antagonistic people, again, antagonistic, narcissistic, I'm using those similarly, are more likely to engage in hurtful behavior like cheating, flirting, and doing things you ask them not to do. And they tend to do that more often if they perceive their partner, you, to be more forgiving. So the short answer is that these narcissistic people, once they think that they can get away with it, they basically take advantage of their partner's agreeable and perception of their forgiving nature, which may be the case if you have forgiven them in the past. So if they think you're going to forgive them, they're going to do those things. They know, the narcissistic person knows that the behavior is a problem. But because they are manipulative and exploitative, they also believe they can get away with it and not lose the partner, not lose you, because they do the calculation and assume that the odds are good that they will be forgiven. The interesting flip side to this is that what they found was that people who were more agreeable, so people who are more agreeable are more modest, more empathic, more honest, more ethical, more trusting. When people were that agreeable, they were less likely to engage in bad behavior when they perceived their partner to be forgiving. Did you hear that? If you are a nice person, agreeable person, and you perceive your partner to be forgiving, you were less likely to do something in the relationship that would be harmful to your partner. You, as an agreeable person, recognize how important safety is in a trusting relationship. And this is such a reminder, their research is such a reminder that agreeable, nice, warm, kind, empathic people are literally living in an entirely different situation than the antagonistic person who exploits every perceived weakness that they can use to their advantage. So the big takeaway is that forgiving narcissistic people fills people with regret in the long term. It can also often feed the self-blame and the sense that we are foolish or codependent or a sucker, or that we lack self-respect, or that we lack self-esteem because we're foolish enough to keep forgiving and then keep getting screwed. But when the damn world is always telling you how great forgiveness is, and everyone from therapists to rabbis to pastors to other spiritual advisors to family members keep telling you to forgive, it feels like you're not only going against your nature if you don't forgive, but you are also getting this sort of pro-forgiveness stance from the general messaging of the world and all the toxic positivity nonsense on social media. And remember, narcissistic and antagonistic people rarely are accountable and are much more likely to blame you for why they cheated or why they betrayed or why they lied or whatever their breach of trust is or their manipulative behavior or their harmful behavior is. They're not going to take ownership. And if McNulty and Russell's study is correct, which I think it is since it's based on good data, these narcissistic folks are going to do it again and again. Oh, and just a reminder, they will never forgive you if you should breach their trust. And not only if you were to breach a narcissistic person's trust, not only will they hold it against you for perpetuity, they're also going to seek revenge. So this raises the bigger question. Can you actually stay in a relationship with someone if you don't forgive them? Can you remain in a relationship with a cheating or dishonest or financially deceptive or betraying spouse or partner? Can you continue to show up and remain in a relationship with a dishonest or exploitative or shady family member? Can you keep working for or with an unethical colleague or boss if you don't forgive them? Well, we do it all the time, right? And here's where being honest with ourselves matters. A key piece to all of this isn't whether or not you forgive. It's about being honest with yourself about whether or not you forgive them. And you do not need to blast this to the world. In fact, discernment means being wise about with whom you share this "I don't forgive them" with. If within yourself you're like, "I don't forgive them," can you stay in a relationship with them? I would actually argue yes. It's a bit of a relationship light, but yeah, you could, and people do, and sometimes we have to for all the reasons people stay in relationships. Because lots of people do not have the luxury of fully disengaging from antagonistic and narcissistic relationships. And folks, you're living it. You know the laundry list of reasons: money, minor children, post-separation abuse, fear of the narcissistic person's vindictive behavior, cultural reasons, not wanting to lose other relationships to you that matter, that are connected to this narcissistic or antagonistic person. The list goes on and on. So lots of people stay. what you stay in when you in your heart don't forgive is an uncomfortable, cognitively dissonant, tense, and at times even self-loathing situation of, I feel so gross still pretending and interacting with them. And that self-loathing part is tough. We sometimes feel like we have sold out if we continue to engage with or stay in a relationship with someone that we don't forgive or trust. Well, listen, life ain't that simple. And maybe some people live in some beautiful fantasy, rainbow, unicorn, crystalline universe where all this happens. The rest of us live in the real world where we don't always get to do this. So this sense of self-loathing can be tricky, and it can actually be a very psychologically harmful form of self-blame. So the question for you then is, can you shift that a little and not treat it as pretending as much as a concept that I've shared before on this channel and in my books called soul distancing, which is actually just a form of discernment. I've used this analogy before, but let's say you were to view your world, your world, your life as a stadium or an auditorium. There are going to be better seats in the house of you, right? Your best people, you're all in, trusted, empathic, have your back people. Well, I think they should get the orchestra seats or those fancy luxury box seats where they kind of bring you snacks, right? Put the good people in the good seats. People you like, but maybe don't know as well, or don't know well yet, or just may not fully vibe with, maybe even some work folks you know on the periphery that are okay, but you couldn't quite see being friends, throw them in the mezzanine. They're there, but they're not too close to the stage. And then these folks who have betrayed your trust, who continue to manipulate and be hostile and invalidating and take advantage of you and continue to lie to you and all the rest of it, but perhaps they're people you also can't just walk away from now and can't not have in your life. Well, put them up in those nosebleed seats. What's the point you even came to this show because you can't see anything? The top row where they're far, they can't even get close enough to get a picture of you. And they aren't close to the most vulnerable parts of you. The bottom line, and people don't like this, but oh well, it's truth. Those top row nosebleed seat, you don't forgive them people, but they're still in your life. With them, it's just superficial engagement. It's talking about weather and the price of gas. You learn to engage with them in a way that feels safer for you. It's like putting on safety goggles when you use a power tool. You're protecting yourself against the risk of something getting in your eye. You don't share the good news with them. You don't share your bad news with them. You don't be vulnerable with them. You know they're limited. You really lean in to the radical acceptance, the realistic expectation, and recognition of their limitations. You don't have to announce to them or anyone else that you don't forgive them. In fact, I don't recommend it. And you also don't need to be cold. Be you. Yellow rocket, right? Thank you, Tina. There will be a lot of nodding and saying, interesting. Whoa, yeah, wow, I didn't know that. All that filler talk. Engagement is letting them talk, because Lord knows they love to talk, knowing it's a one-way relationship. Developing other social relationships, though, where you are heard and supported and can be you and not always have to be hypervigilant and tiptoe on the eggshells and can make mistakes and share your needs and not live in fear of the gotcha and being shamed. I hate to use the word strategic, but it's strategic. And sometimes that sort of warm, strategic disengagement is also something that may put other people that matter to you that still have to be in your interaction, such as your kids or other family members or coworkers. It just may put them at a little bit more ease. It brings down that tension. Now you may be thinking, okay, Dr. Ramani, to stay in a relationship where I don't forgive, well, isn't that just me being inauthentic? I'm not saying that. You can't be authentic with a narcissist on any day. That's a fact. What I'm talking about is restraint, awareness, discernment, and reality. Listen, if you want the fight, have the fight. You can tell them, I don't forgive you, but I'm still staying in this relationship, etc., etc., etc. Only you know your nervous system. Only you know your personality, your trauma history, your appetite for conflict, how you navigate gaslighting. For some folks, they say, bring it. I'm speaking my truth. I am not being dishonest. And that's fine. Great. But for a lot of other people, it's overwhelming and maybe even dangerous. Every narcissistic, antagonistic relationship is similar, but also quite different. Is it ideal to stay in one of these relationships where you don't forgive? No, it's not. None of this is. But we are complex creatures that have complex social systems that are embedded in unjust systems and surrounded by enablers, and we have to live in reality. And while some people may have the circumstance where they can just cut all ties, that's not the norm. When trust gets breached in a relationship, or we are emotionally harmed in a relationship, even when we forgive, the landscape of the relationship changes forever. We learn something about the other person we can't unsee, no matter how hard our dissociative systems try. It's a loss of innocence. Sometimes the thing is a tiny, imperceptible change, and sometimes it's a major seismic event. Even in relationships where real repair and accountability happen, there's a hairline fracture, a tiny crack. Listen, even healthy relationships have a few cracks here and there. It happens. It's real life. And we're able to keep loving through the hairline fractures and little cracks, especially if safety returns and honest apologies and accountability and none of this blame shifting nonsense happens. Then even after breaches, the relationship can actually grow and evolve substantially. But that ain't what's happening in a narcissistic relationship. I have worked with lots of clients in these situations. I have personally been in these situations. With time, I don't forgive them, that whole way of thinking, it's not your top of mind. It becomes part of the ingredients that shift and cement the radical acceptance. Even personally with me, with the people that I don't forgive, I still show up as me. It's definitely a more restrained me. It's a less open me. It's a less curious me, but it's also a careful me. These are the people I don't forgive but can't get away from. They aren't in the front row. They sure as hell aren't in the luxury box. Some of them are in the top row mezzanine or in that very last row. You know, the last row where the seats don't even have backs on them? Does that other person, or do those other people in my life sense the distance between me and them? Probably. But they broke it, they bought it. That's the situation that they created. Workplaces, families, marriages, friendships. We get hurt or screwed over. Sometimes we forgive, and sometimes we don't. Let the not forgiveness, in those cases where you can't get out, let that not forgiving be a catalyst for discernment and caution. The most advanced level of healing is when you can be able to sit with the tension of the not forgiveness, but not let it be a net of holding back that you cover all of your relationships with. Learn the difference. Because I'm hoping in your case, even if it's just one, that some people are still sitting in the front of the house. And maybe you can't leave now. But someday as life happens and circumstances unfold, as you see it more clearly, as you live in the realistic radical acceptance, the day comes. Maybe the family member that was keeping you in the family fold, like a beloved grandparent or aunt, dies. Maybe you find the new job or you finish a degree that lets you then leave the toxic boss and go to the new job. Maybe the kids grow up and you aren't as sort of hijacked financially and in as financially a precarious a place. Life happens. Remaining in your relationship now doesn't mean it will always be like this. And frankly, these relationships where forgiveness doesn't really happen can fill us with deep wells of gratitude for the relationships we have that are safe and healthy and trusting, because you can truly feel the difference.